The sun was high in the sky as she stepped out of her modest car, smoothing her simple dress. She wasn't dressed in designer labels or flashing expensive jewelry, just an ordinary woman running errands on a busy afternoon. Her husband, a man of immense wealth, always insisted on keeping their lives low-key despite their fortune. He believed in humility, and she loved that about him. The car dealership gleamed under the sunlight, rows of shiny vehicles lined up like trophies. She had been thinking about upgrading her old car for a while, and today felt like the right day to browse. As she walked in, a few salesmen glanced her way, their eyes quickly scanning her from head to toe before turning back to their conversations. One of them, a tall man with a slicked-back haircut and an overly confident smirk, finally approached. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, though his tone suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. She smiled politely. "Yes, I'd like to look at some SUVs. Something reliable." The salesman barely hid his smirk as he looked her up and down again. "You sure you're in the right place? These cars aren't exactly cheap." His words dripped with condescension. She blinked, taken aback. Was he really judging her based on her appearance? Before she could respond, he continued, "Maybe you'd have better luck down the street at the used car lot. They've got some decent options for your budget." A flush of embarrassment crept up her neck, but she held her composure. She had dealt with worse before. "I think I know what I'm looking for," she said calmly. The salesman chuckled, shaking his head. "Listen, lady, I don't want to waste your time, or mine. These cars start at 60 grand. You sure you can handle that?" She took a slow breath, her patience thinning. Instead of arguing, she simply turned and walked toward one of the higher-end models, running her hand over the smooth exterior. The salesman followed, irritation clear on his face. "You're not serious, are you?" he scoffed. "That's a luxury edition. Unless you've got a sugar daddy hiding somewhere, I don't think." "That's enough." Her voice was firm, cutting him off. She had heard enough. Without another word, she pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. The salesman rolled his eyes, muttering something under his breath as he walked away, clearly dismissing her. Little did he know, the text she had just sent was to her husband, a man whose response would change everything. Within minutes, the dealership's manager rushed out of his office, face pale. He hurried straight toward her, ignoring the confused stares of his staff. "Ma'am, I had no idea you were here," he stammered. "Please, accept our deepest apologies." The salesman who had insulted her frowned, looking between them. "What's going on, boss?" The manager shot him a furious glare. "You just insulted the wife of one of the wealthiest men in the country." Silence fell over the showroom. The salesman's face drained of color as realization hit him. He had made a terrible mistake, one he would soon regret. The air in the dealership had gone still. The salesman's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his earlier arrogance replaced by sheer panic. The manager, still sweating, kept his gaze locked on the woman, his hands clasped together as if begging for mercy. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet confidence in her stance said everything. "I just wanted to buy a car," she said simply. "But your employee here made assumptions instead of doing his job." The manager nodded rapidly. "This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable." He turned to the salesman, his voice sharp. "You're done. Clean out your desk." The salesman's face twisted in disbelief. "You're firing me? Over this? You insulted a client based on how she looks," the manager snapped. "That's not how we do business." Meanwhile, the other employees whispered among themselves, some shooting nervous glances her way. A few customers had stopped browsing, drawn in by the sudden drama. She could have walked away right then. She could have let the firing be the end of it. But her husband had other plans. A deep engine roar cut through the tension. Heads turned as a sleek, black luxury car rolled up to the dealership's entrance. The doors opened, and out stepped her husband, tall, composed, and radiating quiet authority. He wasn't flashy, he didn't need to be. His presence alone commanded attention. The manager's breath hitched. "Sir, I assure you, we're handling this." Her husband held up a hand, silencing him. He walked straight to his wife, his expression softening as he took her hand. "You okay?" She smiled faintly. "Just annoyed." He gave a small nod before turning to the manager. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "My wife came here to buy a car. Instead, she was disrespected. Now, I'd like to know how you plan to fix this." The manager swallowed hard. "Of course, sir. Whatever you want." "I don't want special treatment," her husband interrupted. "I want fairness. If this is how your staff treats people, maybe this isn't the right place for us." A beat of silence passed. Then, from the back of the showroom, another voice spoke up, an older salesman who had been watching everything unfold. "Sir, if I may?" He stepped forward, his demeanor respectful. "I'd be happy to assist your wife properly. No judgments, just good service." The billionaire studied him for a moment before nodding. "Finally, someone who understands common decency." The tension in the room eased slightly as the older salesman guided the woman toward the vehicles, treating her with the courtesy she deserved. Meanwhile, the fired employee stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. But the story wasn't over yet. Because the billionaire had one more message to send, and this one would reach far beyond the walls of the dealership. As the older salesman showed her the latest models, answering questions patiently, never once making assumptions, the atmosphere in the dealership shifted. Employees straightened their postures, customers who had witnessed the earlier scene now watched with interest. Word was spreading. Something big was happening. Meanwhile, the billionaire stood near the entrance, scrolling through his phone. He wasn't just checking emails. With a few taps, he sent out a message that would soon send ripples through the entire car industry. Back at the SUV display, the woman finally settled on a top-tier model, elegant but understated, much like her. The older salesman smiled warmly. "Excellent choice, ma'am. I'll get the paperwork started." As he walked away, her husband approached, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "All good?" he asked. She nodded. "Much better service this time." A small smirk played on his lips. "Good. Because I just made sure this won't happen to anyone else here again." She raised an eyebrow. "What did you do?" Before he could answer, the manager came rushing over, face flushed. "Sir. I just got off the phone with corporate. They said." He hesitated, as if struggling to believe his own words. "They said you've just acquired a majority stake in the dealership?" A few nearby employees gasped. The billionaire kept his expression neutral. "That's correct." The manager's hands trembled. "But, why?" "Simple," he said. "If a company lets employees treat customers this way, it needs new leadership." The truth sank in like a stone. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about change. The woman watched her husband with quiet pride. This was why she loved him. His wealth had never made him cruel, instead, it gave him the power to fix what was broken. Meanwhile, the fired salesman, now loitering outside the building, peered through the glass doors, confused by the sudden flurry of activity inside. Then his phone buzzed. A news alert popped up. Billionaire investor takes over luxury dealership after wife faces discrimination. His stomach dropped. This wasn't just a bad day, this was a career-ending disaster. And it was all his fault. Inside, the billionaire turned to his wife. "Ready to go?" She smiled. "Almost." Then, to everyone's surprise, she walked over to the older salesman who had helped her. "Thank you for your kindness today. I have a feeling you'll do great under the new management." The man blinked, stunned. "Ma'am?" The billionaire nodded in agreement. "Starting tomorrow, you're the new sales manager here." The showroom erupted in applause, except for one former employee outside, who could only watch as his life unraveled through a pane of glass. But the story wasn't over yet. Because news travels fast, and the internet had opinions. The dealership buzzed with a new energy as employees processed what had just happened. The older salesman, now promoted, stood frozen for a moment before snapping into action, directing staff to prepare the paperwork for the sold SUV. Meanwhile, whispers spread like wildfire among the remaining sales team. "Did you hear? He owns the place now. That guy who got fired is screwed. Do you think more people will get fired?" The billionaire's wife noticed their nervous glances. She leaned toward her husband and spoke softly, "They're terrified of you now." He sighed. "I don't want that. I just want things done right." She squeezed his hand. "Then show them." Understanding flashed in his eyes. He turned toward the gathered employees and raised his voice slightly. "Listen up." The room went silent instantly. What happened today was unacceptable, but it's also fixable. From now on, this dealership operates on one rule: every customer gets respect. No judgments, no assumptions. Just good service. A young saleswoman near the back dared to speak up. What if someone really can't afford the cars?" The billionaire didn't hesitate. "Then you help them find what they can afford, with the same courtesy you'd give anyone else." Murmurs of approval rippled through the staff. Outside, the fired salesman had finally mustered the courage to slink back in, hoping to beg for his job. But when he saw his former co-workers nodding along to the billionaire's words, his shoulders slumped. There was no coming back from this. Just then, a sharp click-click-click sound came from the entrance. A reporter, tipped off by the news alert, had arrived, camera in hand. "Mr. Billionaire. Can you comment on why you bought this dealership?" The billionaire's jaw tightened. He hated media spectacles. But his wife stepped forward smoothly. "We believe businesses should treat people well," she said simply. "That's all." The reporter's eyes darted between them, sensing a bigger story. "And what message do you have for employees who discriminate against customers?" This time, the billionaire answered, his voice calm but firm. "They won't work for me." The finality in his tone made the reporter gulp. As they finalized the car purchase, the newly promoted manager approached hesitantly. "Sir, about inventory, should we expect changes?" The billionaire considered it. "Actually, yes. Add a line of mid-range vehicles. Everyone deserves quality options." His wife smiled. This was why she'd fallen in love with him. His wealth hadn't hardened his heart, it had widened his perspective. By the time they drove off in the new SUV, the dealership already felt different. Employees stood taller. Customers were greeted warmly, regardless of their appearance. And the fired salesman? He was last seen deleting his arrogant social media posts as his inbox flooded with angry comments. But the ripple effects were just beginning. Because the reporter's article was about to go viral, and one particular person was not going to take it well. The reporter's article exploded online overnight. Billionaire buys dealership after salesman mocks his wife, and his next move stuns everyone. Comments poured in by the thousands. Most praised the couple's stand against discrimination, but a few critics called it an overreaction. Meanwhile, the fired salesman, let's call him Jake, was drowning in humiliation. Old coworkers ignored his calls. His girlfriend, embarrassed by the viral story, dumped him via text. Even his favorite coffee shop barista gave him a weird look. Jake sat in his tiny apartment, scrolling through the hateful comments with shaking hands. Karma's a beast. Hope you learned your lesson, loser. His face burned with shame, but beneath it simmered something uglier. Anger. It wasn't that big of a deal, he muttered to himself. She could have just laughed it off. Meanwhile, at a charity gala that evening, the billionaire and his wife moved through the crowd, unaware of the storm brewing. A well-known businesswoman pulled the wife aside. I read about what happened. You handled it with such grace. She shrugged. People shouldn't be judged by their clothes. The businesswoman's eyes gleamed. You know, this could be a movement. #respect over appearances. Before she could respond, her husband appeared, his protective instinct kicking in. Let's not turn her into a hashtag, he said gently but firmly. Later, as they left the event, his wife teased him. You looked ready to throw someone out back there. He opened the car door for her. I just don't want you pressured into being the face of some campaign. She kissed his cheek. My hero. Back at his apartment, Jake was now drunk, ranting to his only remaining friend, a fellow disgruntled ex-car salesman. They think they're so perfect, he slurred. But that rich bitch probably wanted to humiliate me. His friend, equally bitter, leaned in. You know what's funny? That dealership's got a big charity event next week. Bet they'd hate a little protest. Jake's bloodshot eyes lit up. The morning of the charity event dawned bright and clear. The dealership had been transformed, balloons, a red carpet, even a local news crew. The billionaire's wife adjusted a "Donate Here" sign as employees greeted families from a nearby shelter. Then, a commotion. Jake and 3 buddies marched in with handmade signs, elitists pretending to care. Fired for telling the truth. The crowd murmured uncomfortably. The wife's stomach dropped, this was supposed to be a happy day. But before she could react, something unexpected happened. A young boy from the shelter, no older than 10, tugged Jake's sleeve. Mister, why are you yelling? They're giving us Christmas presents. Jake faltered. The kid's worn-out shoes and hopeful eyes were a mirror he wasn't ready to face. The billionaire started toward the protesters, but his wife stopped him. Wait. Silence fell as Jake crouched to the boy's level. They're not good people, he muttered lamely. The boy pointed at the wife, who was handing a toy to a little girl. She smiled at me. That's good. Jake's sign slipped from his fingers. The billionaire chose that moment to step forward, not with threats, but with an offer. Want to help hand out gifts, without the sign? Jake's friends slunk away. But Jake? He stayed. Not as a protester. Not as a victim. But as a man finally seeing the truth, that dignity isn't something you earn with money, or lose with pride. The charity event carried on, the tension dissolving like sugar in hot tea. Jake stood awkwardly near the gift table, unsure of his place. The billionaire's wife caught his eye and gave him a small, cautious smile before handing him a stuffed toy. For the next kid, she said simply. Something in Jake's chest tightened. He'd expected gloating, or at least cold indifference, not this quiet offer to help. A little girl with pigtails shyly approached him. Jake knelt down, holding out the toy. Here you go, kiddo. Her face lit up. Thank you, mister. She threw her arms around his neck in a quick hug before darting off. Jake froze, blinking hard. It had been years since someone hugged him without wanting something. Across the room, the billionaire watched the scene, arms crossed. His head of security leaned in. Want me to keep an eye on him, sir? He shook his head. Let him be. His wife joined them, slipping her hand into her husband's. He's not a bad person. Just lost. The billionaire raised an eyebrow. After what he said about you? People say stupid things when they're hurting, she murmured. He kissed her temple, marveling at her capacity for forgiveness. As the event wound down, Jake lingered near the exit, wrestling with himself. Finally, he marched up to the billionaire's wife. "I owe you an apology," he blurted out. She studied him, the defensive hunch of his shoulders, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. "Go on. I judged you. And I was wrong." His voice cracked. "I've been blaming everyone else, but, the truth is, I'm just a jerk." To his shock, she laughed, not cruelly, but warmly. "Well, admitting it is the first step." Jake exhaled shakily. "Is there any way I could get my job back?" The billionaire stepped forward. "Not that one." Jake's face fell, but then he continued, "But we're opening a second location. If you're serious about changing, you could start there, as a trainee." Jake's mouth dropped open. "You'd give me another chance?" The wife smiled. "Everyone deserves one." 2 weeks later, Jake stood in the gleaming new dealership showroom, in a trainee's polo instead of his old designer suit. A middle-aged couple walked in, their clothes dusty from gardening. His old self would have sneered. His new self walked forward with a genuine smile. "Welcome. What can I help you find today?" As he listened to their needs, something unexpected happened. He enjoyed it. No games, no superiority, just helping real people. Later, as he clocked out, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Proud of you today. Wife's first name." Jake stared at the screen, then quietly saved the contact. Not as his boss's wife, but as the person who'd shown him who he could be. Meanwhile, at their penthouse, the billionaire frowned at his wife. "You're texting him now?" She shrugged, rinsing a wine glass. "People change when someone believes in them." He pulled her close. "Remind me never to underestimate you." She grinned. "Oh, I will." Months passed, and the new dealership flourished under its fresh philosophy. Jake, once the arrogant salesman who judged customers by their shoes, had become one of the most requested employees, not for slick pitches, but for his genuine patience with nervous first-time buyers. One rainy Thursday afternoon, as he was explaining financing options to a young couple, his phone buzzed. The billionaire's wife again. "Big meeting tomorrow. Wear your blue tie. You're being promoted." Jake's hands trembled as he typed back, "Seriously? After everything?" The reply came instantly, especially because of everything. That same evening, the billionaire and his wife reviewed expansion plans in their home office. "You were right about Jake," he admitted, flipping through reports. "His customer satisfaction scores are the highest in the company." She smirked. "Say it louder." "I was wrong," he announced to the ceiling, making her laugh. Then he grew serious. "But promoting him to assistant manager this fast? That's a risk." She leaned forward. "Remember when someone took a risk on you?" A decade-old memory flashed through his mind, a gas station owner who'd let a broke young mechanic live in his back office in exchange for repairs. The same owner who'd later co-signed his first business loan. "Fine," he grumbled. "But if this blows up?" "It won't," she interrupted, kissing his forehead. The next morning, Jake stood before the staff in his new blue tie, giving the most unpolished yet heartfelt speech in corporate history. "I used to think this job was about fancy cars and fat commissions. But it's really about people. So if I ever start acting like my old self, please, kick my ass." The team cheered. Even the billionaire cracked a smile. Later, as Jake rearranged his new office name tag, J. Reynolds, assistant manager, the billionaire lingered in the doorway. "One condition." Jake tensed. "Sir?" "Next time my wife comes in," he said sternly, "you better judge her." Jake's blood ran cold, until he saw the playful glint in his boss's eye. "By her impeccable taste in husbands?" Jake ventured. The billionaire snorted. You'll do fine here. That weekend, the couple hosted a barbecue for employees. Jake arrived early, awkwardly holding a store-bought pie. The billionaire's wife greeted him at the door. "You didn't have to bring anything." "I wanted to," Jake said, and meant it. As they ate in the backyard, the billionaire watched Jake laugh with coworkers, no longer the bitter outcast, but part of something. His wife squeezed his hand. "Told you it would work out." He kissed her knuckles. "You're always right." "Damn right I am," she laughed. But their peaceful moment shattered as the billionaire's phone rang. The caller ID made his stomach drop. The billionaire excused himself from the barbecue, stepping into his study to take the FTC call. His wife watched through the glass doors as his posture stiffened. When he returned 10 minutes later, his face was unreadable, but she knew that look. "Trouble." "What is it?" she asked quietly as employees laughed obliviously around the pool. "Industry-wide probe," he muttered. "Every major dealership chain is being investigated for hidden fees and loan fraud." He ran a hand through his hair. "They want our records by Monday." She exhaled slowly. They'd inherited some questionable practices when they bought the original dealership. "Do we comply or fight it?" His eyes locked onto Jake, who was now teaching a coworker's kid how to flip burgers. "We do better than both," he decided. 3 days later, press conference. Reporters crammed into the dealership's showroom, cameras trained on the podium. The billionaire stepped up, his wife and Jake flanking him. Effective immediately, he announced, "Our company will pioneer a transparent pricing initiative. No hidden fees. No inflated interest rates. And," he gestured to Jake, who stepped forward nervously, "every customer will receive a signed pledge from their salesperson guaranteeing honesty." A journalist scoffed. "Isn't this just damage control after the FTC probe?" The billionaire's wife smoothly took the mic. "Actually, we've been working on this since before the investigation." She tapped the podium tablet, projecting emails dated weeks prior. "Some of us believe ethics shouldn't require a federal mandate." The room erupted. Jake watched in awe as his bosses turned a scandal into a revolution. That evening, private aftermath. Back home, the billionaire finally loosened his tie, exhausted. "We'll lose 20% of our profits the first year." His wife kicked off her heels. "And gain 50% in customer loyalty." She grinned at his surprised look. "Ran the numbers while you were showering." He pulled her onto the couch. "Remind me why I didn't marry you sooner?" "Because I wouldn't date you until you stopped being a workaholic," she laughed. Their banter was interrupted by a text alert. "Jake. Just got off the phone with my mom. First time in years she said she's proud of me. Thanks for giving me a life worth bragging about." The billionaire stared at the screen, then showed his wife. Without a word, she grabbed his phone and replied. "You built that life yourself. We just handed you the tools." Epilogue. 1 year later. The transparent pricing model went viral, forcing competitors to adapt or fold. Jake, now manager of the flagship location, trained new hires with a simple motto: "Sell cars like you're selling to family." On the couple's anniversary, employees gifted them a framed photo from the barbecue, Jay mid-laugh, flipping a burger while the billionaire pretended to scold him, his wife caught mid-eye roll in the background. The inscription read, "The team that proved people can change." "Yeah, we know proved isn't a word," Jake had scribbled underneath. "But proved sounds more permanent than proven." As the billionaire hung the photo in their hallway, his wife wrapped her arms around him. "Happy?" He kissed her, the woman who'd taught him that true power wasn't in wealth or revenge, but in the quiet courage to believe in flawed people. "Couldn't be happier."